Let me... Hello, my beautiful friends. We are here again today with beautiful friend and colleague, Jacqueline Byrne, clinical psychotherapist specialized in eating disorder recovery and so much more. And for all the women that don't know me yet, I am Claudia Jacqueline, nutrition and dietetic clinician specialized in women's health and eating disorder recovery. And today we are here to talk about IVF and the reality behind IVF. And before I welcome Jacqueline properly, I also would like to mention that both Jacqueline and I, we are pro-choice, pro-science, pro-opportunity, definitely pro-IVF as well. And we are not here today to demonize IVF, and we are not intended to give advices on whether IVF is the right choice for you or not. We're simply going to share stories and our personal stories as well, on personal and professional stories on IVF and how it has impacted our clients. So first of all, welcome, Jacqueline. How are you?
Hello, Claudia. I am doing well. I'm really enthused about this conversation. I think it's an important one to have.
Yeah, and let's get straight into it. Do you find that sometimes IVF is used as a backup plan or a shortcut, especially when women have an eating disorder or don't have their period?
Absolutely. I appreciate the disclaimer you just shared, because I have absolutely no judgment for anyone that's chosen IVF. I think that can be a very smart choice, and maybe the reason a lot of people have babies in arms at this point in time, so we would never wish that away. It's more thickening the plot of what IVF brings into people's lives, because what I witness a lot as an eating disorder specialist, which by proxy means I'm working with a lot of women who are struggling with their fertility or who may not be having a period, and very, very understandably, they might get to a place in their journey where they dearly want to start a family, and their recovery isn't up to where they need it to be able to do that without intervention. So they might give it a year or 6 months or whatever time they feel they can afford, working more intensively, physiologically, dietetically. And then there's like a line in the sand that's given from a fertility expert's perspective, or their own emotional tolerance around it, or their partner's opinion, for when they might dive into the world of IVF. Because we have that notion of a ticking clock, and the biological clock that gets spoken about. You've only got so much time, and you're heading into certain windows, and with recovery, if we can't make it go faster, then we don't want to put in jeopardy the dream of having a family. In our last conversation between you and myself, Claudia, we touched on how it's often sold, and I've heard people say the exact words of, there's always IVF. It's almost like I'll try my best to get my period back. I'll try and do it in the recovery way. And then there's always IVF. If that doesn't work, if it's not enough, there's always IVF. And that's to me what felt really important to unpack today, because it's this assumption that there's a magic wand solution, which means it might actually change how someone's endeavoring in their recovery journey, because they feel like there's a guarantee there as a backup. And as you and I will unpack, I'm sure, more today, IVF isn't straightforward. It doesn't always work. It can be its own very painful, complicated world. But also the reductionist perspective of the baby as the prize. So if we can get a situation where you have a baby, and as a mother, fully appreciate how meaningful that is and how strong a drive that is. But we have a narrative where that's the last scene of the story, and that image of a woman holding a newborn, that is the success story. So that's credits start, scenes close at that point, credits start rolling, because what else is there to say? Whereas the truth is that's then the beginning of the next chapter, which if that woman's body had really low stores, and that was the reason it was difficult to conceive without intervention, if IVF in itself, the process of that experience took a lot out of her physiologically and emotionally, which we'll talk about more, then that thought to be ending scene becomes the opening scene for a whole other world of what needs to be deconstructed and understood to come back into health, and to realize that we're never going to get away with putting ourselves last. And this is the body we have to live life through. It is a body we have to mother through. So even if we can take interventions to make it produce a child, we are then left with that same body to do mothering in, to do life in, and that can start to be where there are more costs than we might originally be exposed to when the beginning IVF conversations come into play.
A few very interesting points that you have touched upon, but especially the fact that IVF is not an exact science. So it doesn't mean that doing IVF is going to lead to a baby, to a pregnancy, let alone a baby. And that's something that normally is not thoroughly discussed with fertility specialists. And normally they tend to say that IVF has a certainty of a 45% success rate, especially with women above the age of 30. But they're obviously looking at studies with women that are menstruating already, not that much with women with current and active eating disorders and long history of hypothalamic amenorrhea. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. But something else that you mentioned is the sentence of, if this doesn't work, I'm going to do IVF. And sometimes I wonder what will happen to a woman if IVF was taken out of the picture, if it wasn't a journey that the woman could actually embark upon. Would that woman give her 100% in a recovery journey so that she could be able to get pregnant and have a baby? And then when it comes to IVF, I think that sometimes it's not even thinking about the baby as a final prize. It's more about the pregnancy as the final prize. So finally, I got pregnant. Finally, my body succeeded in doing something that I couldn't do. And sometimes it's very much overlooked how the pregnancy may unfold, meaning is the pregnancy gonna lead to a living baby, to a healthy baby? How is the woman gonna thrive or not thrive during the pregnancy if she's in a state of malnourishment and stress? And how is that woman and their relationship, so how is the couple, the family, gonna be impacted by the postpartum stage, which both you and I know that it's possibly the most difficult. And talking about personal experience, I did suffer from infertility for a good 5 years, and I definitely consider IVFs. I went to speak with a fertility specialist. I discussed all my options. And even though I went through 5 years of infertility and a very tough pregnancy, both of them, as you perfectly know, no one really prepared me for how tough the postpartum phase was going to be. And just thinking of entering the postpartum phase from a, once again, malnourished perspective is something to trade very carefully and to be aware of. Because that's normally when a woman, especially with a past history of eating disorder, is more keen to go back to disorder habits and to put herself last, not only after her job and her partner, but also now after the baby and all the other things that are gonna be on the table after having the baby. So shall we start unpacking a few of the reasons why IVF, maybe it's not the best choice for women that are going through a tough time? Do you have something that really stand out that you really would like to discuss first?
I've supported so many women going through IVF and maybe feeling some reluctance about it, feeling nervous about it, but once they sort of get into the protocol, feel ready to meet their baby. They're ready to move forward in that process. And I've watched the waves of heartbreak and disappointment when, you know, I have seen women fall pregnant after the first round and have a live baby from that round. That does happen. But also so many, and as you highlighted, the statistics aren't in our favor if there's a history of malnutrition, if there's history of amenorrhea, then the body is showing the signs of already being in such deprivation. We can create a pregnancy through that intervention, but it's still going to be sapping the body of most stores, so that mental health during those pregnancies can have very different outcomes. And once there is a successful conception and the pregnancy is progressing, there can be incredible physical sickness that comes with that, which IVF can sometimes also trigger or exacerbate, because there are much higher levels of hormones in that woman's body than there would be without intervention in order to harvest eggs, etc. So that affects our biochemistry, that's going to affect our neurobiology, and that is still relevant at the time of birth. That the impacts to hormonal processes are still operating differently by the time that woman is giving birth and entering postpartum. So we already have an escalated risk of postnatal anxiety and depression if there's been freestanding mental health conditions, which if someone was going through an eating disorder, there are. We then have the physiological impact exacerbating the likelihood of that, and the additional hormones that body has to correct and process in a time after birth. We're then left with a body that didn't have the resources to conceive, that's trying to support a new life and continue the life of this mother. So when we think about, and you know, we're not here to tell anyone today whether or not to decide IVF is right for you, but I think I know for myself, I felt a really strong want to advocate for the untold stories. And that's all, just to offer the women that are listening today increased levels of information from both sides of the story to make an informed decision from that point. And maybe with all of the above, it's still worth it. And that's anyone's prerogative to come to. But I have heard from women I've supported that if they knew what they're in for, they wouldn't have gone about it in that way, because it is a rush. And unfortunately, I do think it's true that fear can be taken advantage of, because there is a business model to fertility intervention. There is a mindset, of course, from people that have been trained from a very pathological lens on fertility, trained to see what's wrong and trained to see what's in the way. That the very genuine advice might also be, why wouldn't you just do everything you could to control the outcome and ensure the outcome? But stepping back and looking at it from a macro lens, at the more holistic outcome of all these factors playing out fully, or zooming out to a couple of years' time and looking at what that postpartum journey has been, is it the dream that was being sold?
Absolutely. And I've also noticed with the clients that I work with, and also by looking at scientific studies, that IVF tends to lead to a more medicated pregnancies and birth. So that's also something else that needs to be considered. And as you perfectly explained, and I'm going to put it in layman's term, I had lots of clients coming to me and saying, while I was going through the injections, the hormonal injections, I felt like I was becoming mad and I was becoming a completely different person. When we go and speak with a fertility specialist, we are simply described the process, meaning, okay, you just need to take estrogen, synthetic form of ethinyl estradiol for the first part of the cycle. Then there is an LH injections, and then you will need to take progesterone pessaries. As simple as that. And the woman normally gets monitored throughout the process. Very simple. And this is why the fertility specialist tends to push someone to make a decision right then and there or as soon as possible. Because as I said, it's a business model, and it's also quite expensive business model. But they never really sit down to explain to a woman how much it can impact her personal life, psychological, mental health, and how much it can impact the relationship with a partner. Because for some women, it's all about going from 0 hormones to 1,000 and more hormones within the space of 2 weeks. So the sentence of "I feel like I'm going mad," it's pretty accurate. It's like living on a high PMS for the whole duration of the excuse me, of the IVF journey. Not to mention all the side effects, the nausea that can come because of the medications, the swelling, the edema from the injections. Some women have a very high fear of needles or invasive procedures, and that are normally not described, and they do happen on a weekly or sometimes even daily basis. And once again, there is also the impact on the couple, because let's be honest here. IVF, yes, is done on a team level, meaning that the husband gives the sperm, which is then is going to form the embryo. But the reality is that the woman needs to take time off work to go for the ultrasound, to go for the blood works, to go for the egg retrieval, the hospital for the implantation. The woman needs to deal with the impacts from the drugs. And the couple needs to also discuss the financial concerns when it comes to fertility treatment, because as I said before, there are situations where women get pregnant at the first go, fantastic, and IVF works, because absolutely it does work. And if that's something that you are considering while you're listening to us, please, if that's something that sits well within you, go ahead, do it, try it out. It does work. And sometimes it doesn't work on the first try, which means that I met also a client that she tried 14 rounds of IVF. And when she came to me, her body was completely battered and her mindset was all over the place for all the obvious reasons. And this is not very well explained by fertility specialists. And mind you, there is never psychological support. There is sometimes support from an acupuncture point of view or from some somatic point of view, but you will never find that person that sits next to you and tells you, you're gonna feel a little bit cray-cray and it's gonna be difficult. And if you don't get pregnant at the first go, you're gonna feel shattered from the inside, because that's what it feels like, and you're gonna be okay. You're not gonna have that conversation with anyone from the IVF clinic unless you're the unicorn that finds the perfect IVF clinic out there. And which is why sometimes, even if IVF is the decision, if that's what a person wants to do, it's always a good idea to do it in conjunction with a professional that can support you and that knows what you're talking about. Yeah, and I think that also addressing all these components, it's very important before making a decision. So asking ourselves, do we have the money? Do we have the time? Are we ready? Are we strong enough of a couple? Are we also ready for the postpartum journey and for the pregnancy on its own? If, as you said, it's a subfertility is coming from a place of malnourishment. Anything else that I missed out upon?
And that's great advice, to consider your parameters before going into the process, so that maybe, we're going to try 3 cycles and then reevaluate, or we'll do this until December and take a break, just to know what your what your markers are going to be. And I think that can help psychologically pace yourself. I'm grateful you spoke to that perfunctory way that IVF is often explained, because if we may have had some medical monitoring on a different issue before, or we've done some type of medical protocol, of course we borrow from the experience that we've had, and we imagine it's going to be another version of that. But the very different element with IVF is that we're literally talking about life and your baby's life. So the emotional, the cataclysmic emotional difference there is hard to even put words to. But when you're told that there might be so many eggs, and those eggs haven't survived that night, or now there's only X amount of viable blastocytes left to be implanted or frozen, and then that pregnancy doesn't continue, or to be told in the process of having so many tests and being monitored that your levels have dropped, and while you thought you were pregnant, that's now not going to be continuing, it's devastating in a way that's in another dimension from your blood work came back and your iron has dropped again, right? Like it's just hard to imagine, I think, before living through it, or relating to having children, or someone that's maybe been through a difficult pregnancy, that might be able to imagine how that very intention of trying to create a baby is such different psychological territory than another type of medical intervention. And that's often what pulls the carpet out from underneath people to what I witness.
You're absolutely right, because we based everything on past experiences, but no one can prepare someone for IVF. And the feeling that you get after knowing that you're not pregnant, when you have tried so hard to do whatever in your power to get to the finish line. Shall we also talk about how we can actually support women that are deciding upon IVF, or that are currently doing IVF? Because I don't want to sound doom and gloom, and we both considered IVF until we had two very healthy kids, and we have been helping so many clients that are going through their own IVF journey, some of them very successful journey as well. So what would you do? What would you suggest to a woman that is embarking upon this life-changing journey?
If possible, I would strongly recommend connecting to someone, who has done IVF, who might be in a position of being more vulnerable with you and reflective of their journey, which isn't to say, again, it would be all doom and gloom. Like if they have had a pregnancy and a healthy baby, they may well feel quite optimistically about it, but just to highlight to you what you're in for and where the trickier parts might be, what to be aware of, because that's then really validating if it happens. If you're starting the hormonal protocol and you're feeling cray-cray, then oh, that's what my friend told me was going to happen. That's what, this would be about that time where those markers are really starting to elevate, and it explains why my brain's having these changes and I'm feeling this way at this time. I think, again, just to reiterate, having some sort of plan around how you're going to be entering into it, and how many times you agree with your partner feels reasonable to try before having a breather and reevaluating, or just having a holiday and trying again. And to continue to work. Treatment is most efficacious when it's multidisciplinary. So just because you have chosen IVF, which might be a really empowering, wonderful decision for some individuals, continue to work with your dietitian, continue to work or find psychotherapeutic support, dietetic support, so that you're optimizing the health in your body to the best of your ability and preparing yourself psychologically for during the pregnancy and post-pregnancy, and starting to have conversations. I love supporting pregnant women and having conversations that I believe are going to bridge them into motherhood as supportively as possible, so that they have had a prompt to consider some ideas around what that next chapter might look like for them, and how they can integrate it into their self-concept before just being bombed with it at the entry of their child coming into their life. Is there anything you would add, Claudia?
Well, I think all that you have said, and just to give a quick example, something that I love doing with my clients that are going through fertility is to actually make sure that I book a session on the day where the blood tests come back, because the blood test may be positive or negative, and sometimes knowing that you have someone to talk to, just in case that the results are negative, can completely change the situation, because it's gonna not only help you to feel better, but also to create a plan for the future. But just to sum it up, and I also wrote it down so I didn't forget, exactly what you said, focusing on hormonal and nutritional restoration while going through the IVF cycle and during the preconception period. Definitely mindset, psychological support, and all that I'm talking about is through professional, obviously, because sometimes friends can be helpful, sometimes not at all, especially if they've not gone through IVF or they have no experience about what IVF feels and look like. And last but not least, as you said, having a timeline in place, something that you can discuss with a partner so that you know exactly what's going to happen, so that you don't find yourself at the 14 cycles with no money in the bank, feeling completely depleted and with no hope, feeling that you're about to quit your job and go and live in the Himalaya. Yeah, so that you don't get to that point, basically. Never seen that happen before, so that was definitely an extreme scenario. But working with as I said, with different people that can support your situation in different ways, I think that it's going to be impactful for all the right reasons. And yeah, and that's it really. And just to light it up even more, I have to say that I have a few clients that after going through the hypothalamic amenorrhea recovery protocol and after working with some of their food rules and few foods and lowering their training routine, even though they failed their IVF cycle up to that point, they managed to have successful cycles after restoring their hormones and after really prioritizing their health. And I think that also trusting that it's going to work and getting into IVF from a place of hope is definitely going to be a game changer.
Beautifully said. Yes, I really want to highlight that hope, both for being able to integrate IVF and maximize your experience with it because of support and because of your mindset, but also that it is possible to recover from HA. It is possible to recover from the physiological and psychological impacts of an eating disorder and still have a healthy child, and not to give up on that.
It's not about the baby, it's about the mom, and we really need to change the narratives. I know that so many people are thinking nowadays, let's work with babies so we make a better world. No, we actually need to work with mothers, because mothers are going to be the ones that are going to carry the baby, are going to give an imprint to the baby, and then we can expect a better world. And that's basically the job that the two of us are doing at the moment, right? Working with moms so that we can, make this place a better place.
Spot on, exactly.
And Jacqueline, it has been a pleasure talking with you today. We are going to have you back next month with a completely different topic. So you're going to share with us different ways in how we can find support during our eating disorder and hypothalamic amenorrhea journey. And you're going to shed some light about essential oils and mindful practices that are going to be beneficial no matter what people are going through in life. So I'm really excited about that. And I will post everything on social medias and Facebook page. And if any of you are listening to this conversation and would like to get in contact with Jacqueline, I'm going to add her website and contact details just down below. So thank you so much, Jacqueline, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next month.
Likewise, Claudia. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.